Hi there. I guess you could say I'm writing this as a cautionary tale to those of you who plan on studying abroad in the future. Now, I don't mean to discourage you from going in the first place, it's more like I just want you to be aware of this, so that something like this doesn't happen to you too. I guess I should explain a little bit. Last summer, I was selected to participate in the study abroad program that would be centered in Rome for several months. Like anyone would be, I was elated. I had never been out of the States before, so this was really going to be an adventure for me. In the weeks that followed, I happily packed anything and everything I could fit into my suitcase. And I'll be the first to admit that I had way overpacked for the trip. I was nervous about leaving my parents for the first time, but I was also excited for the newfound freedom that I would have while in Europe. Before I knew it, my parents were dropping me off at the airport, and I was boarding a 19-hour flight to Rome. And despite being long and tedious, the flight wasn't all that bad. When I exited the airport, I was greeted by the program supervisor and several other students who would be studying with me. They were all about the same age and all looked just as excited as I was. From there, we went to our mandatory orientation meeting, and afterwards we went to pick up our apartment keys. In the months that preceded the trip, we were responsible for getting to know our would-be roommates, as well as finding a place to stay that we could all afford. There were 3 girls that I would be staying with. They were all nice enough and made an effort to make me feel welcome, though I will admit it's a bit hard to get close to the group of pre-formed friends. But despite my slight alienation, it seemed that things were all going to work out well. All of us were on a similar budget plan, and by that I mean that none of us really had much money to spend at all. Because of this, we were all on the same page while searching for the cheapest apartment that we could find. After several days of searching, we stumbled across an ad for an ancient apartment located above the Campo dei Fiori. That was a prime location, and we couldn't believe that it was still available, no less listed for an unbelievably low price. This immediately sent alarm bells off in my head. The place was enormous, yet the rent was cheaper than the much smaller apartments in a far less desirable part of the town. However, reason never wins out in a group of excited young women. They had already made up their minds, and if I would be staying with them, then this was my only option. We each received our own set of keys, as well as a map with walking directions, but because of its prime location, it really didn't take us long to get there. The Campo was amazing. During the daytime, it was filled with a vibrant market, while during the evening it was lined with lively street performers. All of the apartments surrounded it looked really ancient, so ours really didn't stand out all that much. After circling the square 3 or 4 times, we finally noticed the number nailed to the front of a massive old wooden door. This would be our home for the next 3 months. I fought with my keys for a moment until there was an audible click of the heavy old lock. The thick old door swung forward with a screech. We were then met with a long, winding staircase. Then we all looked at one another and groaned. None of us had accounted for the fact that the building had been constructed long before elevators were common. So 3 sets of stairs and countless complaints later, all 4 of us, with luggage in hand, stood outside our new front door. Once again, I reached for my set of keys and fought with the stubborn lock. As soon as the front door was opened, there was a stampede of young women trying to claim the best rooms. Being a 3-bedroom apartment, it meant that 2 of us would have to share, but I personally didn't care, so I let the others battle it out. When the dust had settled, I found that I would be sharing a room with a girl named Stephanie. That was fine with me. Stephanie was nice enough, and she was also very quiet, my ideal feature in a roommate. Over the course of the rest of the day, we ran around exploring our new home. There were 2 bathrooms, a full kitchen, and a living room with an ancient TV. Once again, I began to feel uneasy. Just how was it that we were able to get all of this for such a low price? But before I could finish the thought, I was interrupted by a fit of loud squealing. My initial reaction was to panic, however, I soon learned that all the noise was from excitement, not terror. Down at the other end of the apartment, near the front door, apparently there was another part of the flat that we had missed. I followed the noise until it led me to a long, dark hallway. And there, at the end, behind the group of squealing women, was a washing and drying machine. Now, for those of you thinking, what's the big deal? I should explain that these things are incredibly rare in Rome. Generally, exchange students have to wash their clothes by hand in the sink before hanging them up to dry outside. So what was a luxury item like this doing in such a cheap apartment? Just as the screaming quelled, it picked right back up again as the girls noticed a door adjacent to the washing machine. Beyond that door was a master bathroom. It had a balcony, a clawfoot tub, and even a bidet. The girls immediately started fighting over whose bathroom this was going to be. I didn't really see why we couldn't share, but apparently the others were dead set on having ownership. But as it turned out in the end, it ended up being my bathroom. Stephanie had made a logical argument that because she and I had to share a bedroom while the other two got their own, it was only fair that she and I got to share the master bath. And I'll admit that at first I was actually kind of excited. It was, after all, a really nice room. However, over the course of the next several weeks, I began to grow more and more wary of the room. I don't really know how to put it into words. It's like every time I went into that room, I could feel something's eyes on me. And the voyeuristic element wasn't really what had me so unnerved. It felt like whatever was watching me was angry. That it didn't want me there, and that it wanted to hurt me. I began doing everything in my power to avoid the room. I asked Alicia if she would mind if I were to use her restroom occasionally. I made up a lame excuse about how it was far more convenient since her room was so close while my bathroom was at the other end of the flat, at the end of the very long hallway. She happily agreed, though, when I told her that she could use my bathroom anytime she liked. And this worked well for a while. For about the first 2 months of my trip, I was able to completely avoid the room. It wasn't until the final month that everything began to unravel. One night, as I prepared to brush my teeth, I found that Alicia was already occupying her bathroom. I could hear giggles coming from down the hallway, so it was clear that both Stephanie and our other roommate were both getting ready for bed in the master bath. I decided that since there was strength in numbers, I would be alright just for tonight. So I made my way down to the large bathroom, where I joined the boisterous girls in brushing my teeth. They were in the midst of some conversation when Lindsay, our other roommate, had broken into such a furious fit of laughter that she had to lean on the wall for support, but suddenly she jolted upright as if she had been shocked. We all looked at what had been the cause of her reaction, and there, on the wall, about the same level as the bathtub, was a tiny door. None of us had noticed it because it was the same color as the walls. The landlord had even painted over it. Naturally, this made me a bit nervous. Whatever it was, the landlord clearly didn't want anyone opening it. But as usual, throwing all caution to the wind, Lindsay reached for the handle and began tugging with all her might. Stephanie clucked her tongue in disapproval before pulling out a small pocket knife. She began delicately carving along the seam of the door. I wanted to beg her to stop, but I really didn't have the energy to argue that night. So, within a few minutes, Lindsay had yanked the little door open with a loud crack. It was a crawlspace. A fairly large crawlspace. My guess would have been that you could have fit at least 3 or 4 people in there. I was rather curious as to why the landlord would have sealed up an empty little room. And while I thought about this, Stephanie and Lindsay began calling for Alicia to come see their new discovery. She was just as excited as they were when they first discovered it. However, as could be expected, the excitement waned over time, and eventually the crawlspace was just turned into storage for a few towels and some laundry baskets. In the following days after the unsealing of the crawlspace, things started to go from eerie to downright terrifying. Annoyingly, Alicia had changed her nightly routine, so that I could no longer use her bathroom in the evenings. Once again, I was back in the large bathroom. All the while, the feeling that I was being watched growing worse and worse. I began to get so paranoid each time I went into that room that I would literally jump at the slightest noise of pipes settling. And as soon as I was finished, I would run at full speed down the hallway and close the door behind me. For some reason, I seemed to be the only one feeling this way. It's not like I could have told the other girls either. I was already enough of an outcast as it was, so I just kept to myself and hoped that it would go away eventually. But much to my discontent, that was not the case. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I found myself alone in the bathroom. As I stood in front of the mirror brushing my teeth, something set the hairs on the back of my neck straight to attention. There was a faint rustling noise, not the kind that could have been caused from my roommates at the other end of the flat. Any noises caused by them would have had to have been quite loud to reach me all the way at the end of the long hallway. No. This noise was very faint, the sound of someone gingerly shuffling things around. I stood completely silent, terror filling me with each second. The soft rustling noise was coming from inside the crawlspace. I turned on my heels and ran down the hallway to grab the attention of my roommates. I tried to explain to them what happened, but all that came out were incoherent murmurs, and eventually I managed to utter, "Something's inside the crawlspace." They looked at me with fear and confusion in their eyes. As a pack, we moved together down the hallway into the bathroom. I nearly fainted as I entered the room, when I saw that the tiny door was wide open. Though this discovery filled me with horror, Alicia immediately pointed to the balcony's sliding door. Stephanie had left it open to air out the bathroom after I've taken a shower several hours ago. She peeked her head out the door and pointed to the slanted rooftop adjacent to ours. There was a pigeon's nest occupied by a few birds. The girls surmised that a pigeon must have found its way in and was the cause of the disturbance. They all had a good laugh as we made our way back to our living room. I pretended to shake it off, but I knew it was not a pigeon that had caused the rustling noise. First off, the tiny door had been shut tight all day. None of us really cared to leave it open because it smelled quite musty inside. And secondly, the door had been shut when I left the bathroom. I am certain of this, yet there it is, wide open, when I returned. You're not going to tell me that a pigeon knows how to and is capable of opening and closing a door all by itself. It was at this point that I began to suspect that something was terribly wrong with this apartment. When I got back to my room, I pulled out my laptop and called my best friend via Skype. She had always been the skeptical and methodical type. However, she also kept an open mind towards things that were hard to explain. I decided that out of anyone, she was probably the best one to talk to about my situation. And as I expected, she was initially quite doubtful. Though she also agreed with me that a pigeon was quite likely not the source, she asked me if I had any photos of the crawlspace. She said that if she could see it, that would help her understand a little more clearly and possibly help her to come up with a more logical explanation. Relieved at her willingness to at least hear me out, I reached for my camera and made my way back down the eerie hallway. When I arrived, I found, to my relief, that the door was still closed. I stood in front of it for a moment, gathering my nerve before finally pulling the little door open. And despite the clutter left inside by my roommates, it was empty. I snapped a quick photo before closing the door once more and running back to my room. I immediately plugged my camera into my computer and uploaded the photo. When I finally opened the image, I was petrified by what I saw. There, in the upper right corner, was a face, baring its teeth at me. My whole body began to violently shake. Dear God, that thing is in our home! I muttered to myself. Fear began to overtake me. Someone had sealed whatever it was inside of that crawlspace, and we let it out. I was so absorbed in my panic I didn't even notice when my roommate returned. She was so blissfully unaware of the imminent danger we were in, yet even if I tried to warn her, she would not believe me. I was at a loss of what to do, and I finally decided that I would deal with it in the morning. Though not by a large amount, I did feel braver in the sunlight. From there, I attempted to get some sleep. Though for the first time ever since being there, I closed and bolted my door before getting into bed. Stephanie eyed me suspiciously while doing so, but I just told her jokingly that Lindsay had been sneaking into our room the previous nights and had been stealing my Nutella. She laughed heartily, shaking her head before settling down for the night. I will admit that the only reason I was able to find any sleep that night was because of her presence. Something about not being alone can give one a sense of false security.